Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. In 1951, beloved, celebrated, legendary playwright Tennessee Williams won his first and only Tony for Best Play for the drama The Rose Tattoo, a play that centered around a woman unraveling, surprise, it's a Tennessee Williams play, after the death of her husband. Now the Roundabout Theater has brought the show back with Marisa Tomei and our next guest, Ella Rubin, who stars as Tomei's teenage daughter blossoming into adulthood. Please put your hands together for Ella Rubin. Let's hear it. Hi.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of this show. It's amazing. It's incredible to see a Tennessee Williams play on Broadway. It's my first that I've gotten the chance to see. What is it like doing Tennessee Williams' language? I mean, you're 18 years old.
Yes.
You're a senior in high school. I'm 35, and the language to me is kind of foreign in a way. It's beautiful, but at this point, it's antiquated. It's become like Shakespeare in a way.
Completely. I mean, it's very poetic and it's very musical. And I think, I'm a senior in high school now, but junior year, we studied him extensively in my English class. And so that being so recent, it gave me good insight into how to sort of decode his language. But also, I got a lot of help from Marisa and our director, Trip, and all the online resources and kind of how to dissect Tennessee Williams. But it's such an honor to just be able to speak his words in any regard.
It's like any great playwright, you can present his work in a naturalist way, or you can present his work in a somewhat farcical way. And what I liked about The Rose Tattoo is it sort of bridges that divide between the two.
Yeah.
It's actually, I wouldn't call the play naturalist at all, but it is a drama with farcical elements.
Totally.
How do you approach that as an actor? What was the rehearsal period like where you were finding the very specific tone that you and the other actors do on stage?
I think that's one of the amazing things about this show is that most Tennessee Williams plays are rooted in tragedy and end in tragedy, and this one kind of begins in tragedy and is about about women uprising out of that. And so in terms of the rehearsal period, I think I wasn't familiar with The Rose Tattoo. I was familiar with Menagerie and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and more of his well-known classics. And so,
Yeah, this is the only play that he won Best Play for at the Tonys.
Right,
yeah.
but it's lesser known, which is surprising once you see it or read it. But in terms of the rehearsal period, it was just definitely a lot of table work, meaning before we would get on our feet or block anything out, we would talk about each word and the spaces between the words and the way they flowed and why they flowed that way. And I think that was so necessary in finding my character's relationships to the world around her and those around her, because otherwise, the mix between tragedy and farce, I wouldn't have been able to, I don't know if I am doing it, but I wouldn't have been able to whatsoever.
Well, you absolutely do it. I think specifically the moment where you crawl in through the window while Marisa is sort of forcing your beau to kneel before, is it the Madonna? The
Madonna.
Yeah, kneel before the Madonna. Those are moments where, is that in the text that your character does that, or was that something that the director brought or you guys came up with during rehearsal?
Yeah, he does give a lot of stage directions in the text, which is very helpful because you can kind of see the way he wants your character to move and to be and to move through the world in that scene. And so it was in the text. That's one of my favorite parts. I think it's so much fun to just climb through a window when this whole other scene is going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely a lot of kind of amazing ridiculousness to everything that goes on in their relationship.
Right. I mean, specifically with Marissa's performance, where she's oscillating between, a woman who is on the verge of a complete breakdown or is in the midst of a complete breakdown, and moments where that in and of itself is very funny and very tragic at the same time.
Right. I think it's because it is Tennessee Williams. A lot of people come in not knowing that they can laugh. And not knowing that, yes, it's Tennessee Williams, and yes, there's tragedy and darkness, but it's also really joyous. There is so much fun in the show, and I think that's
There's
one
a lot
of the...
of comedy in the show.
Oh, yeah, and that's one of the amazing things about Marisa playing Serafina is she, vacillates between the tragedy and the comedy and everything in between so, so beautifully. I mean, watching her do that every night is incredible, and I think it's important for Serafina to be able to sort of, go between all these emotions really quickly like humans do, which I think is not often written for women.
What was it like working with her in the rehearsal period leading up to doing the show with her on stage?
I mean, it was it was incredible because, learning from such a legend at the beginning of my career, this is the biggest thing I've done thus far, and, getting to really, really act with her and learn from her as a human and an actress and a woman in every way was just a really special experience. And I take so much away from that. I learned something new every day from her too during the performance.
Like how to keep your stamina, considering her performances requires an incredible amount of stamina.
Her performance, she has to be constantly
Running
constantly
around,
energized,
jumping, diving.
I mean, physically and emotionally in every way. It's really incredible, and I've never had a performance that was as physical as this one. In terms of one thing I really worked on to try to nail down Rosa was the way that she moves when she's in conversation with each person in her life. Like the way she moves with Jack is different than the way she moves with her mother or around her teacher or when she's by herself in her true core state. And so that was really amazing to see Marisa's sort of physicality in certain moments and kind of try to make it as nuanced as I could.
Well, also the way that she presents the character prior to her husband's passing, where she clearly could be, she's a woman of a lot of energy and a lot of emotion, but at the same time, she hasn't sort of gone through the tragedy yet. She hasn't lost it.
Right.
So how do you sort of establish that this woman could lose it if something bad happens, but she hasn't gotten there yet, while at the same time having enough of a shift for the next part of the play?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and just you saying that completely demonstrates how much that role takes.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I play 12, and then it quickly switches to me being 15. And in the beginning, that was very hard for me to kind of try to. I mean, I'm 18 now, so I'm not that far removed from it. But
Well, that's not true. I mean, those years of 12 to 18, each
Right.
every 2 years feels like a massive leap in maturity and
Completely.
emotions.
You're changing a lot. Yeah. And also, in the length of my life, I haven't lived very long. I'm only 18, so 12 to now is almost half my life. But yeah, I did my best to try to nail down the way she speaks and moves and stands when she's 12 and what's going on in her head, and then the quick switch to when she's 15, and it goes to this really heated moment between Serafina and Rosa and Miss York, her teacher.
I love that moment in the play. What's been the toughest scene for you to get your head around, to be able to do? At this point, I'm sure you can do all of them very easily. You've been really doing it. Yeah. But what was the toughest one that gave you the most fear?
That gave me the most fear, I would say, the final scene between Rosa and her mother, when she's in the wedding dress. Not to spoil anything, but I think as an actor I can be very, quick moving and frenetic and shaking my legs and shaking my hands, and Marisa really helped to kind of ground me, and it took a lot of time for me to get grounded in that scene and be able to have let Rosa evolve, because the play primarily takes place over one day. And from the beginning of that day and to the end of that day, she changes a lot. Yeah. And so I was definitely I had a lot of trepidation about that scene, because I wanted to show her maturity and the fact that she is ready to go on to this next phase of her life. But at the same time, she's still a teenager, and she's still angry at her mother, and she still has angst. But she also has an endless love for her mother, like all girls do for their mothers, that will never cease to exist. I mean, it's constantly there, even in the moments of anger. And so finding the colors in that scene was definitely a challenge, but every night it gets a little easier.
She also she wants her man. She wants a man.
Yeah.
So badly.
She really does.
It is one of the very hilarious aspects of Tennessee Williams' plays, which is everybody is really sex starved in his plays.
Yes.
Including Marisa and including York. I mean, just having those two juxtaposed together
totally
is very funny.
I mean, I really think Rosa is like a mirror to Serafina, because she is just on the cusp of becoming a woman, and she wants to go have sex and get married and do all of these things that, I mean, it's hard to be a woman now and to be, a sexually free woman now. So in the 50s in the South, for a 15-year-old girl, it was even more difficult. And so
A very strict Sicilian
right.
Catholic family.
Especially after her father died, and these Sicilian women were expected to become closed off from the world. Once their husband dies, they're supposed to wear black and have all these practices. And Rosa's refusal to do that is a rebellion against her life thus far, but also I think one of the amazing things about the play is that it is about women becoming more sexually free, and whether they learn that when they're 15 or after they've had a 15-year-old child, and it's much later in life after a marriage, it's really important. And that's one of the greatest things about this play to me, is that just the exploration of women and nuanced women and layered women that aren't just one thing. Because I feel like a lot of times for girls, and especially teenage girls, roles are just sexual, or they're just innocent, and they can't be intelligent and sexual and innocent and also crazy and wild.
Yeah. I mean, one of the great things about Tennessee Williams' women, and I think specifically Serafina in this as well, is that he is trying to deconstruct a person who is in the midst of a breakdown, who is crazy, and how the trappings of the world that they live in at that time have caused that breakdown in a lot of ways.
Completely. Yeah. I mean, I think Rose's upbringing and all the way that they live completely affects how they are and how they are with significant others and people that they want to engage with emotionally, sexually, in any way. And so, Rose is going based off of what she was taught, which is very little. Because from 12 to 15, there's a big shift. And in that shift is after her father died and her mother was in deep tragedy. And so she never really got to learn the way, how she was kind of expected to be around a boy. And that's almost a good thing, because she sort of forges her own path and does what she wants unapologetically.
What was your audition like? Because this is your first Broadway play. What was the audition process like for you? It
was intense. I mean, I only had 3 auditions, which there were 1 audition and 2 callbacks. And usually I think that there are more, but there was a lot of time between each. And so it was just me kind of like biting my nails in anticipation.
Are you auditioning for a lot of things all the time? So could you kind of be like, whatever, if I get that, I get that. I'm auditioning for this other thing tomorrow, and we'll see what comes through.
About this is that, yes, if I had 5 auditions in a week, I was still thinking about the rose tattoo and Rosa. And to me, the fact that I couldn't get her out of my head, and I wanted to be her so badly. I think subliminally, I had to get it, because I think it's such an important story and it's such an important character to play. And, like I said before, she's layered, and you don't get to see that very often, or I don't get to play that very often. Yeah. And so I really, really, really wanted nothing more than to get to play this character. And so the final audition came along. I think it was in like mid-July, and my first audition was in early June. And Marisa was in the room, and Trip, our director, was in the room, and I remember I was nervous, but I also felt some sense of peace, that I felt lucky to get to be Rosa in that audition room for a moment.
So did you audition with Marisa in that room, or were you just for her and Trip?
It was more for her, because there was a reader who wasn't Marisa, but she gave me a really interesting note. We actually did that last scene, the wedding dress scene, for the audition, and they wanted me to say, when I say in Sicilian, basta, basta, un voglio sentire più niente, they wanted me to say it, almost deeper and less sort of up here and floaty. And I remember she stood up with me and sort of like pounded her stomach and was like pounding her feet on the ground, and we were doing that together, and sort of like making eye contact. And then she said, use it. And then I did it, and it just felt so much better and so amazing. And I even just in that moment, I learned so much. So I walked away from that really thinking, whatever happens, I got to be Rosa for that moment, and I got to just take an acting
do this
class.
Weird thing with Marisa Tomei where you pounded your stomachs and stepped on the floor.
No, I walked away, I went home, and I said to my mom, I was like, I think I just got a master class in acting. So I'll keep you posted on the next thing, because I just felt like I learned so much.
It's core work, right? I mean, it's just sort of it's bringing something out from down here, which is a part of acting that is rarely ever talked about. That you want to act often from down here.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never really talked much with people about being grounded as an actor, and so that is, I would say, one of the biggest things I've taken away from this experience is finding how your character is grounded, where they're grounded, and even if your character isn't necessarily grounded in some moments, how you can be as an actor.
I think we have a couple time for a couple questions. Who has a question right here? Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to ask, now that you've been in the play, is there something that you know now that you didn't when you were going into it?
For sure. That's a really good question. I've learned a lot since starting the play. I feel like the rehearsal period was obviously, huge for the development of the show, but once you actually get into the run of the show, I didn't realize how much the audience would affect the performance every night, and how sort of to play with their energy, because sometimes I think that the audience comes in expecting a tragedy entirely, or they come in ready to laugh, and so sort of shifting your energy based on theirs was a really interesting thing that I'm still learning, but that I wasn't expecting.
Next question.
Hi. So you talked a little bit just now about like bouncing off energy with the audience. I was just wondering what message you hope sticks with the audience after they leave watching you guys.
I hope that people, and especially women and girls, leave with two things. One, just having emoted in some sense. I think obviously in our dark times right now, laughter is really important, but so is just feeling openly next to someone, whether you're weeping next to someone or laughing next to someone or any of that. I think it's easy to sort of close ourselves off from all the stuff going on in the world right now, because it sometimes can feel like too much for our hearts. And so I think just letting yourself openly feel is a really important thing. And so I hope people take away that they can feel, and I hope that women take away some sort of greater information about sexual freedom and allowing themselves to be unapologetically intelligent, smart, sexual, nuanced, layered, as all humans are.
Ella, thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on your first Broadway play.
Thank you so much.
The Rose Tattoo starring Marisa Tomei and Ella is at the American Airlines Theater. Everybody give Ella Rubin a huge round of applause for coming by.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.